Honestly, there's probably not another pedal that can rival the Boss HM-2 in terms of mythology and cultural significance. It's not a stretch to say that this pedal is worshipped within the Swedish death metal scene, with some claiming it's simply the best pedal ever created. For anyone on the outside, it's just a terrible sounding distortion pedal, and it can be difficult to penetrate the nearly 30 years of hype to understand why it's so highly regarded. So let's look at some factual history. The early 80s was an explosion of new sounds, with heavy metal being the dominant trend. Heavy music was expanding into all sorts of new territories, and players were demanding more gain, more volume, and thicker, bigger guitar sounds. Boss wanted to cash in on this heavy metal trend and produce a pedal that appealed to these new players. They put it in a black casing, literally called it heavy metal, and marketed it as a Marshall stack in a box. Unfortunately, it sounded crap for its intended purpose, and players continued to use real Marshalls instead. Boss's DS1 continued to sell bucket loads, while the thick, buzzy HM2 gained very little interest from players. The HM2 was produced in Japan between 1983 and 88. Then the production moved to Taiwan until Boss ceased making this pedal in 1991, replacing it with the HM3 Hypermetal and later the MT2 Metal Zone. It was only at the very end of the 80s that attitudes began to shift towards the HM2, with the forging of new, more extreme metal genres. The first wave of Swedish death metal had begun, and bands were looking to sound more gritty, disgusting and repulsive than anything that had come before. As Entombed entered the studio to record their debut album Left Hand Path, they already knew how they were going to achieve that sound. Armed with nothing more than a worthless Ibanez guitar, a cheap solid-state PV combo amp and a Boss HM2 dialed to 10, they unleashed a sound so uncontrolled and savage that it defined the Stockholm sound. Entombed's producer Thomas Skogsberg at Sunlight Studios continued to use the pedal while recording other bands in the genre, further strengthening the pedal's connection to the Swedish death metal sound and cementing its cult appeal. By the early 90s, the popularity of this pedal was on the rise, with fans of Entombed, Carnage and Dismember, but sadly too late to save the pedal from being axed. The following rarity of the HM2 amidst its popularity only made it more desirable, and with so few people managing to get their hands on one, it became almost mythic. It's claimed that the made in Japan models sound better than the Taiwanese made pedals, but because so few people could get their hands on both to compare, it was very difficult to disprove that legend. In reality, there's as much deviation between the components in the Japanese run as there is differences between the Japan and Taiwan models. Each batch probably sounds a little different to the next. The HM2 still sees use on modern metal albums and live sounds. Its disgusting grind is perfect for death and black metal, grindcore, doom, crust and just about any genre that benefits from being thick and filthy.